You could make over $10,000 more per year working a minimum wage job than some of the actors in your favorite comedy movies made. We're going to be looking at the ridiculously low paychecks of comedy legends in movies such as The Wolf of Wall Street, Hangover, and even American Pie. One actor made less than $10,000 for a role that's still being quoted today. When you think of the biggest comedy movie box office hits of the 2000s and the ones that had the biggest cultural impact, what's the first movie that comes to mind? Probably The Hangover. But just wait until you learn just how much the stars of this movie actually made. When the movie first came out, you couldn't go a day without hearing about the movie, and that should come as no surprise given the movie grossed nearly $500 million at the box office and sold about 8 million DVDs. The movie, of course, starred Bradley Cooper, Ed Helms, and Zach Galifianakis. All three were perfectly cast, and to this day, I'm still blown away by how strong their performances were. But if you had to guess how much they actually made for these roles, I doubt you would even get in the ballpark. Let's just start off by saying the movie boasted a $35 million budget. But none of the leads in the movie made over $300,000. That means collectively, Zach, Bradley, and Ed made less than 3% of the movie's budget, which really makes you wonder, how was the rest of this budget even spent? And that's something that I'm still grappling with. But in the end, they would all win big time. And not just because of the success of the first movie and what it did for their careers outside of The Hangover, but also because they each scored a $5 million paycheck for the sequel and a $15 million salary for Hangover Part 3. But the Hangover trio weren't the only ones getting criminally underpaid. And as much as I love Eurotrip, and I would go as far to say as it's in my top 5 comedy movies of all time, this movie was an even more egregious offender than The Hangover. Just like Scotty doesn't know.
Scotty doesn't know that Fiona and me do it in my van every Sunday.
We don't know how much Scott McElwes got paid for this movie, but we do at least know how much Jacob Pitts, who played Cooper and second command in the movie, got paid, as he's the only cast member whose salary information is publicly available on IMDb. Eurotrip ran up a tab of $25 million for its production budget, and based on that size, you would think they had at least $1 million to pay each of the 4 leads, right? Well, not exactly. His pay amounted to $100,000 altogether, and it really makes you wonder, how much did the other 3 leads get paid? But if it's any consolation, Jacob, and the rest of the cast and crew for that matter, got an all-expenses-paid vacation to Europe out of the deal, as this movie was shot entirely in Prague. But let's dive into a critically acclaimed Oscar-nominated performance, one that you would guess brought in millions of dollars. And I'll never forget watching Wolf of Wall Street for the first time. I remember it was my freshman year. I watched it after school one day, and I remember I was just looking over my back like a hawk, because I was not allowed to watch R-rated movies, and I was so pissed that my parents did not let me watch this movie. So I waited for a time when they just dozed off and were resting in the living room, and I was in the back room watching this movie, and it was like just a very strange movie watching experience, because it was like one eye was watching the movie, one eye was watching where my parents were at. You know, you really love Jonah Hill in this movie. He really took over the screen, but he certainly did not get rich off the role. He only made $60,000 for his performance, and I promise this is the last role on the list that made real money. But I mean, come on. How many Oscar-nominated performances in a movie that was shot for $100 million made only $60,000? But Jonah stated that he took such a low payday because he just really wanted to work with director Martin Scorsese. And this sort of passion and love for cinema is exactly what makes the art form so special. But let's get into some real sobering salaries. you'll be surprised to learn just how low the budget and inevitable pay to the actors was for one of the most iconic indie comedies of all time. Swingers is really what put Vince Vaughn, Jon Favreau, and Ron Livingston on the map. And while salary information isn't publicly available for the movie, we do know that it was shot for only $200,000. And if we've learned anything from the previous roles, it's that almost certainly none of the actors in this movie made more than $10,000 despite the success that it became. And to be honest, I would be shocked if any of these guys made more than $5,000 on this movie. As someone who's budgeted, produced, and self-funded 2 features, there are a ton of hidden costs that people just don't think about. These include insurance, meals, and locations, not to mention the crew pay, all of the supporting cast, extras, and so on. Though, given the success of their careers and the millions of dollars they made because of this movie, I would say it was well worth it for all of them. But speaking of my filmmaking journey, if you love this style of comedy, I want to give you my first comedy feature titled Rosetta Stoned, which is a stoner comedy passion project completely for free. I'm including an email list sign up in the pinned comment down below. You'll also have the opportunity to see my second feature, Hometown Summer, which just wrapped its limited theatrical release, if you contribute to my crowdfunding campaign for my third comedy feature, which will be launched very soon. But let's get really crazy now. Like, huge name and well under the $10,000 pay rate. Rebel Wilson, one of the faces of the Pitch Perfect franchise, and an actress who has done quite well for herself. Can't say she exactly broke the bank with her appearance in the 2011 comedy Bridesmaids. Get this, she says she only made $3,500 for her role in the movie. But to add insult to injury, she says she ultimately lost money by being in Bridesmaids. She had to use that paycheck to pay SAG-AFTRA union fees and had to buy a dress for Bridesmaids premiere. I would say things ended up quite okay for her in the end, though. The first Pitch Perfect movie would come out the following year, and she made $10 million for Pitch Perfect 3, but we gotta save the best for last. And while he made a pinch above what Rebel made in Bridesmaids, he was just straight up the face of this film and eventually the entire franchise. Yet his pay did not even scratch $10,000. We're talking Seann William Scott for his portrayal as Steve Stifler in American Pie. Seann only made $8,000 for the role, but when you break down the box office numbers and just how much of a selling point he was for the movie, I think it's pretty hard to argue that he wasn't worth at least $50 million plus just to the original movie. And the pay couldn't even keep him afloat. He had to get a job immediately afterwards, selling churros at the zoo. This, of course, was temporary, as he'd soon star in the likes of Road Trip, Dude, Where's My Car, and the countless American Pie sequels, making $5 million for the latest installment. He was also set to star in a comedy that would have been directed by Pineapple Express director David Gordon Green. But plans fell through, and I break down exactly what happened to this movie and countless other would have been comedy classics here.